Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to do another Q&A video. So first of all, thank you so much for posting all of your questions. If you do want to take part in these Q&A videos, then definitely go and join the Discord. The server name is Appetite for the Dead. I'll leave a link down below in the description of this video if you do want to join. And yeah, I'll do a Q&A next week. I do these every single week, every single Wednesday. And yeah, let's get started with the very first question here. So Q&A, do you think that Rick would ever get killed off? Since Andrew Lincoln said he wanted to see it, no hate towards the character. It might be me paraphrasing it since I don't remember what he actually said. Yeah, I don't really remember him saying that entirely, though I do remember him like joking around quite a bit about Rick's death and whatnot, and it could have really been just a lot of that, you know, in terms of how the character is going to go and all of that. And it's hard to say, honestly. It's really hard to say whether or not Rick Grimes will ever be killed off. I think it's going to be one of those things where they're going to wait until the very, very end where it makes a lot of sense just to kill the character off. Like, I think right now there's still too much story to do, you know, like a Rick and Daryl reunion, Rick's reunion with everybody else. There's still another story that you can tell out there as well. Like, there's still other things that you can do that it just doesn't make too much sense to really kill off the character yet. But if Rick's a lot older, you know, if Andrew Lincoln is, say, like 60, 70 years old, and all the other characters are getting a lot older, and, you know, we have this new generation with Judith and RJ, and, you know, newer characters, there's Herschel and etc. I think that it makes sense that at a certain point you're going to be like, all right, I think this is where we'll probably end Rick's story, especially if Andrew Lincoln is like, yeah, you know, I think this is going to be my last story is Rick Grimes. I think this is it. And then I think that's where they kill off Rick Grimes. And I think Andrew Lincoln's not entirely ready for that yet. I think he's about 50 years old or something right now, right? And so, I mean, he could play Rick Grimes for the next 20 years easily, right? And obviously, it's going to be every 4 years, 3-4 years or something. He'll probably do a series. And obviously, he does have other projects. Maybe he doesn't want to be playing Rick Grimes, you know, when he's 70. Maybe, you know, he stops around like 60, 65. But I could see him definitely playing the character until he gets a little bit older, you know, roughly around like Herschel's age, right? I could definitely see that because I think he can do a lot of stuff there with the story. But I think that, yeah, in terms of Rick Grimes ever being killed off, I think it's going to be some time. And I mean, who knows? Maybe it ends up being one of those things where he does survive. Like I've always said, and I still do believe this, the story here is going to end, or at least the arc here anyways, with all these characters is going to end with either Rick or Daryl dying. I don't see both of them dying, and I don't see both of them surviving. I think at this point, because of these characters staying around for so long, that it would be such a crazy moment to kill off one of those characters. Like, people would be talking about it so much online that I think it would just be really insane. And honestly, I think as a writer, you do want to do something like that because I think it would be really interesting to see those characters in those very final moments there. And I hope that if Daryl's dying, that Rick is there, and also vice versa, right? Like, I think that makes sense that you would go in a direction like that. Now, you don't want to wait too long if you are going to kill off any of those characters, but I could definitely see within the next 10 years, Rick or Daryl dying in a series at some point. You know, Norman Reedus said that he wants to play Daryl for another 6 or 7 years. Obviously, that can change. You know, that's just sort of how he's feeling right now. But in another 6 or 7 years, maybe he feels very differently about it, where he's like, no, you know, I think I'm done playing Daryl at this point. Well, around there is when you can probably kill off Daryl. And maybe around that point is where, you know, they actually do a spin-off series, or if it's The Ones Who Live season 2 or season 3, or I have no idea at that point, but maybe that's where they reunite Rick and Daryl, because I don't think Rick and Daryl are going to reunite on The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. I don't see that being something that does happen. I think that would just be very underwhelming, to be honest. I think there could be a lot of Rick connections here and there, and Daryl finding out about Rick and this and that, but I think specifically in terms of Daryl reuniting with Rick on this show, that is way too much. So yeah, to answer your question, I think that, yes, Rick could be killed off at some point. I just don't know really when, and I think it's still going to be some time. And Q&A, you would think after how many years in the apocalypse, I don't know, probably more than 15, but I am not sure, that walkers and their bodies would be decaying heavily by now due to mostly hydration and maybe starvation. But instead, they are now introducing the variant walkers. I know some of them are experiments. How are we not seeing weaker and decaying walkers by now? This was definitely something that I was having a big issue with a couple of years ago, where I was like, you know what, we're 10 years into the apocalypse and these walkers should start to decay a little bit more. And they are. If you actually look at the walkers, they are decaying a lot more. I think with the variants, and you gotta remember too, like, not everyone died in the very beginning. So there's not going to be all of these decaying walkers everywhere, right? Like there's going to be some walkers that have died, more recently, or I guess people that have died more recently that, they're more fresh walkers, right? So that's going to be a thing. And obviously, I feel like the way these walkers decay as well, a lot of it does happen sometimes very rapidly. I think of the bicycle girl in the very first episode of The Walking Dead ever. Like that walker was really decaying a lot. And that's what I mean, when you really look at it, I think it just depends on what they want to do with the story. That's just sort of how the walkers are going to be. And there's still a lot of people, there's definitely way more than like 1 million people left in the world. I know it seems like there's not that many people, but there's definitely way more than that. I mean, is there 1 billion people in the world still? I could see that. 500 million people still left in the world. That seems really insane. But again, there's like 6-7 billion people in the world or whatever. If there's 500 million people left and over 6.5 billion or whatever the number would be are walkers, that's a lot of walkers. Like that is a lot of walkers. And so it makes sense that there would be that many people, right? Walkers are just going to keep growing and growing. And that's sort of what Major General Beale said, that like the walker amount is going to get a lot worse and worse as the years go on. And again, he mentioned that 14-year plan. And that's what I mean. That 14-year plan is something that I really look at in terms of the overall Walking Dead universe and what Gimple is thinking overall in terms of how he handles all of this, because those are the things that you should look at in terms of where the future is going to go and like what the other spinoffs are going to do, because that's the stuff that Gimple is specifically telling us, about the story, like in these shows here, is that there is this 14-year plan. Like he thinks it's going to go here, this and that. So I wonder if in 14 years, will that happen? Will humanity basically be extinct and walkers will take over the entire world? Are we about to witness something so insane happening like that? Obviously Rick made a decision in that moment, and hopefully he's right about it. Hopefully, he's right about the fact that no, we're just going to help out people right now. And if that ends up happening, then we'll deal with it then. Because yeah, I mean, for Beale to be right and for Rick to make that decision in that moment, that would definitely be really, really unfortunate, right? So yeah, in terms of your question, with walkers and whatnot, I think that, yeah, you could definitely make the argument that they would be, I guess should be anyways, looking a lot more weaker and dehydrated. But I think that it's just one of those things that it just depends on the season. It depends on the show. And I would say overall, the walkers have been decaying a lot more from season to season from the original show. Sometimes you are going to have more fresh walkers, right? And I think it's exciting to have the variant walkers here and all of that. So Q&A. Going off just pure speculation, do you think Daryl and his group go to Spain because France has fallen? That's one of the things that I have personally sort of, I guess, come to the conclusion of, which is the only reason why they're leaving France is because France is a place that you just can't really be in anymore because maybe it's overrun with variant walkers. It's very hard to say because obviously it could be as simple as Daryl and Carol want to go back home. And if you look at the synopsis for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 3, it does say, on their journey back home, Daryl and Carol, they're trying to make it home, but their path and their story and all that just ends up getting farther and farther away. And so now they're in Spain, this and that. Though I will say, I don't know if it mentions Spain specifically. There's been some stuff with filming that I'm not going to talk about in here, but I'm very curious on like the locations for the show. I know they're filming in Spain, but is it actually set in Spain? Very confused on some stuff. But yeah, anyways, I'm definitely very, very excited about where they're going to go next year with the story and what they decide to do with like the nest and all of that. I think Daryl and Carol for sure are going to obviously leave the nest and they're going to try find their way back home. It's just, will the other characters follow? What happens to Isabel, Caudron, and Laurent, Madame Genet? Like, there's so many characters. There's no way you're just going to like completely say goodbye to every single character, and then in season 3 you start brand new with a entirely new story, new characters and everything. Like, a lot of people really like Isabel, and some of the other characters as well. Like, I think that you do want to have like a group that Daryl is with. Maybe those characters are off doing something else, but Daryl and Carol, it shouldn't just be them basically traveling around and just meeting people, this and that, because I think that they should form a group. People really like the group from season 2, and I think it would be really cool to see, obviously, for future seasons, because you build up fan favorites and then you start to see when these characters die, it becomes really, really emotional. And yeah, it seems like season 2 is going to be absolutely insane, so I am very, very excited about that. But yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen with France and whatnot. I will have to wait and see, I guess, for the season. I know Norman Reedus has been promising like a really crazy finale here, so maybe everything just completely falls apart, right? Q&A. If only one reunion could happen and you had to pick one, which one would you choose and why? So the 3 options you gave were Rick and Daryl, Rick and Morgan, and Rick and Negan. Well, I would have to say Rick and Daryl. Like, I want to see the other reunions, but Rick and Daryl is just something that would mean a lot more to me. You know, when you really look at that scene, I believe from season 4, episode 16, like it was just a really crazy scene where the whole journey that they were on up until that point really established Daryl as like Rick's brother. And when you really look at season 1, it was like Rick and Shane. Season 2, it was Rick and Shane. And then, you know, Rick and Shane's relationship sort of fell apart and Daryl started to become more popular. In season 3, Daryl was there helping Rick out all the time, but obviously like there was no real, you know, friendship formed there at all. But you go into season 4, and based off of that whole journey there, after they lost the prison, they lost all of this, they lost so much together, you know, like Rick lost Lori, lost like everyone, you know, and then Daryl also lost Merle that season, or I guess the season before. They all lost so much, and I think it just built up to that moment where Rick looked at Daryl and was like, "You're my brother, Daryl," you know. And I think at that point they just became like, yeah, they're brothers, right? And you go to season 9 and Rick's, you know, second to last episode, in episode 4, when Rick says to Daryl, like, brother, like he's trying to help him up because Daryl's falling, right? Like he doesn't want Daryl to give up. He's just like, keep finding your strength, like I'll help you up, you know. And like that was just such an incredible moment there that I think that, yes, Rick and Daryl have a very, very special bond that I think everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see Rick and Daryl reunite. And man, a series like that, it definitely needs to be more than 6 episodes for sure, because when they reunite and the story that happens afterwards, you're going to want to see them together a lot. You're going to want to have a lot of really emotional scenes. Like it's going to be such a crazy moment. Like the second they announce it, and that's the thing too, like the excitement of watching all of that is going to be very cool, but you got to remember, like when do you think that reunion is going to happen? In like 4 years from now, 4 or 5 years from now? Whenever they announce it, it'll be like 2 years before that, right? Maybe even 3 years before that. Like the second they announce it, like, yes, Rick's coming back in this new series, this and that. And, you know, Norman Reedus is expected to be a part of that series. The excitement everywhere is going to be absolutely insane. And then we're all going to be watching Daryl Dixon's like last couple of seasons and be like, all right, so how does Daryl eventually get back to America? And how does that set up this story, right? So that's why I really like watching the story right now, because they're setting up this stuff right now. Like Scott Gimple has been saying, and like all the showrunners from the other shows have been saying, that like they are putting things in place here and there to sort of build up to a moment like that. And they just hope that they can get to a moment like that. So we'll just have to wait and see how this all works out here. But yeah, definitely very exciting. And so, yeah, I would have to choose Rick and Daryl. Q&A, do you think the Triple P card could be a connection to the spies with Madame Genet Pouvoir? I think that it is possible that there could be some connections there. I think that, again, I kind of talked about this the other day in a video where I was like, I think I said that I don't know how much they want to make connections with Beale right now, because of the fan response. But again, I think if you just did that and you made things really exciting and you just make the story overall like awesome, you know, I think fans will like it. I think that's sort of the whole thing with the CRM right now, is that people were very disappointed in Beale, but I think you could fix a lot of that and change a lot of that if if Rick is coming back at some point and you sort of build the story around that a little bit, and maybe things are a bit different overall. But if there is a connection, that would be really cool. But honestly, as of now, I think the whole Triple P card thing is not related to Beale's spies at all, and I think is something separate, because I think that Gimple, and again, this is me literally just purely speculating, I have no idea at all, but I believe that Gimple likely wanted to do a lot more with the Triple P card for The Ones Who Live, but because, you know, the story was ending so fast with the CRM and with Beale, he was like, you know what, I've been really working on that story for a while, I don't want this to go to waste like this fast. So I think that's why, you know, we got little teasers here and there, but I think that's set up for the future. I think we are going to see the Triple P card play out at some point very soon. And it's likely going to be Daryl Dixon, and maybe it has nothing to do with Madame Genet, but more, you know, whatever this group is going to be in Spain, right? Because obviously there's going to be a new villain group that will be there in season 3, right? So that's my thoughts on that right now anyways. But yeah, definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.